Good morning and welcome to this webinar organized by the ENSMOV consortium dealing with auction schemes and also our mixed approach, which contains some competitive elements. I'm Dario Di Santo. I represent FIRE, the Italian Federation for the Rational Use of Energy, that is the Italian partner of ENSMOV. And I will just remind you that this aims to be an interactive session. So please use the question panel in your GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar control panel in order to ask what you think is useful for the discussion and feel free to connect with us. Okay, I'll pass the baton on to Vlasis Okonomou, who is the coordinator of this project. Please, Vlasis.
Thank you very much, Dario, and thank you all for joining. This is one of our events organized under the ENSMOV project. You can see the full title of the ENSMOV project is Enhancing the Implementation and Monitoring and Verification Practices of Energy Saving Policy under the Article 7 of the ED. So this project is focused solely on the Article 7. We've been doing a series of events, and the idea is to help member states exchange knowledge between how to best implement the specifics of the Article 7. It has started finishing in May, but we will be prolonged for 6 more months. And the key objectives are, first of all, to share knowledge and experience, as we said, but among member states on how to implement the policies. So we start from the design phase up to the implementation phase on how to best implement the policies. Countries that have performed well or with problems, they can share knowledge on that on a mutual basis in bilateral meetings or in multilateral meetings and discuss how the specificities of each policies have worked or not. Then the second one is to develop resources and tools. We're developing a series of tools and a lot of capacity building activities on the specific needs for the implementation of the Article 7 for the period 2021-2030, of course, and then to assist the authorities in setting up monitoring and verification schemes. So not only on checking on how MRV schemes work, but really going in the field and helping member states develop and implement new schemes, or redesign the policies for the towards 2030 period as they are reflected in their NECPs and the revised NECPs in the coming period. Now, we are working on several countries. You can see we cover most of Article 7, and our partners are a mixture of mainly region energy agencies and also research organizations, groups, and company groups. And we are practically trying to work on all the EU member states and accession countries. The concept is on a format of exchanges and a lot of EU workshops, regional workshops, and national meetings. The way we operate it is that we have carried out a series of need assessments among the member states, and I know that some of you participants have already been asked about these issues, on what to determine as key problems. And when we started already the project, the main issues on the implementation aspects were how to ensure that the schemes were sustainable so they could operate from the one period up to 2020 to 2021, 2030, if we speak about obligations, auctions, financing, and others. Then how to get political support for these measures they wanted to implement under the Article 7, how to have complementarity, to maximize complementarity with policies, tax routes, subsidies, and so forth, and commitments on budget. And when it comes to the monitoring and verification, the most important elements were the difficulties for the data, the verification requirements, also baseline setting to understand which savings are eligible or not, and the standard things in the agencies, mainly the lacking of staff, and the complexities, of course, of the MRV requirements. The topics for the first cycle, so the whole program is run into cycles, were on cost effectiveness of the energy efficiency policies, then some basics on the MRVs, and financial aspects on the EEOs and alternative measures. On the second cycle, which we are running now, and will be, of course, the third one, is that the first ones were the most prioritized were the Article 7 climate targets. This was a very toply preferred, I would say, topic. And then we have side effects of energy efficiency obligations and alternatives, IT tools, step-by-step setting up MRVs, and issues on additionality and materiality. And while on we're having also other events that we run now on the setting up of the energy efficiency funds, banking and borrowing rules, the operation of the ESCOs, business models, and regulatory changes and declining rate of energy savings. So these are all topics that we've received from the ranking we made, and again, of the highest interest to you and to the member states for better addressing them. Now we also have a platform, which is one of the tools, Article 7 ED.eu. I think that's really worthy to check. It has lots of information on the Article 7. It's going to be the central hub for all the Article 7 debates, with a lot of trainings, information, and detailed aspects and specific topics for the Article 7 implementation, and lots of highlights from all the member states on the current status based on the reporting you provide to the European Commission. And that's what we will do today. Today we'll speak about a very specific topic, and we welcome here all our participants. The next floor will go to Sam Thomas from RAP, who will introduce a bit the market mechanisms. Thank you very much. And here's all our links. Of course, you have been disseminated on that from the invitation you received. Thank you very much and enjoy the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Vladis, for this introduction. Now it's time to go into the topic of today's webinar with Samuel Thomas from RAP. Please, Samuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I'm showing the right screen.
Presently, we see a lot of things.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. So this should work.
Yeah, now it's right.
Except I need to show the main screen again. Okay, perfect. Right, well, look, thanks very much for inviting me to introduce this topic. So I'm Sam Thomas from the Regulatory Assistance Project. We're a non-partisan NGO dedicated to accelerating the energy transition. And we're an ENSMOV partner in the ENSMOV project. I used to work at the International Energy Agency, and that's where I did some work with some of my current colleagues at RAP on market-based instrument energy efficiency. I'm going to use that work to sort of introduce the topic of auctions, looking at both energy efficiency obligations and auctions, comparing them, before kind of ending on some questions about auction design, which I hope will lead neatly into the meat of the workshop, which I'm sure is what we're all looking forward to hearing from, which is all the case studies from the auctions that are currently happening in various parts of the world. So, yeah, here's the content. So just overview of the market-based instruments work, and then looking at EEOs versus energy efficiency obligations. So when we looked at market-based instruments at the IEA, we weren't really looking at sort of classic market-based instruments like taxation policies, for example, that aim to, through changing prices, influence the decisions that that actors make. We were really looking at energy efficiency policies specifically, and how they might be made more market-based. And we define these as instruments that are basically looking to deliver a specific outcome or output, such as it might be energy savings, but it might be emissions reductions from energy efficiency actions. It might even be delivering capacity resources to enable electricity grids to operate more efficiently. Or it might have a completely different focus, like fuel poverty alleviation, but again, through energy efficiency measures. But the key thing, it's about specifying outcomes or outputs and not measures to be delivered. The second thing was that these specific outcomes would be delivered without prescribing the mechanism with which they had to be delivered. So there is likely to be a list of things you can do, or a list of ways in which you can reach your output or outcome. But it would be up to either the obligated parties in an energy efficiency obligation or the bidders in an auction program to specify how they're going to deliver on those outcomes or outputs. And usually they would be, well, almost in all cases, delivered by market actors, and whether that be utilities or bidders or even the wider energy efficiency supply chain through a white certificate program. And that would usually lead to some level of competition or some competitive forces. And this is one of the, I guess, the key drivers behind looking for a market-based instrument, is to install some competition to ensure that public funds, whether it's taxation money or bill payers' money, is used in a cost-effective way. And the number of energy efficiency obligations and auctions has grown considerably. In the period we looked at, the 10-year period, we saw that they quadrupled. They were born in the USA in the 1980s, but it's fair to say by 2015, they were rocking all over the world. Excuse the awful puns. And that big increase we saw during that decade has increased since 2015. We've seen a number of new energy efficiency obligation schemes starting or about to start in Europe, particularly driven by the Energy Efficiency Directive. But we've also seen the number of auctions growing. We've seen new auctions coming up in places as diverse as the US and Taiwan. But it's fair to say that within that overall growth, the number of obligation schemes dwarfs the number of auctions, and the amount invested through those programs is dominated by obligation schemes. You know, we have some obligation schemes where billions are being funneled through them, particularly in the European situation. The auctions, at least in 2015, the total sum of investment through auctions was numbered in the low hundreds of millions. So it's fair to say, I think, that we have a lot more experience on obligation schemes. And so this is part of the reason I'm looking forward so much to hearing about the auction programs that are in place later on in the session. Now, we looked across a bunch of obligations and auction schemes. We can see a couple of auctions on the right here for tender programs in Portugal and Switzerland. One thing to say here, I mean, this is the metric here is cost per kilowatt hour saved, and you can see that it varies massively between the various schemes. It's important to say that this does not say anything about their relative cost effectiveness, because they are all so different. I mean, we saw on an earlier slide that you could define your outcome or your output metric, your performance indicator, in a number of different ways. And indeed, the ambition of the schemes varies dramatically. So we have some schemes where the obligations are very high and billions of euros are getting funneled through them. We've got some schemes which are very much smaller. And of course, the more ambition you have, the higher up the marginal cost curve of effort you're going to push, and therefore the higher the cost per kilowatt hour. Scheme rules are really important. So you might be targeting particular subgroups, like the energy poor. We know the cost of delivering to that subgroup is significantly higher than to the wider population. This is the case in the United Kingdom, which has got the highest cost per kilowatt hour of any of these schemes, but it's 100% focused on low income. The measurement rules are really important. So you know, how you, I mean, almost all of these are using deemed savings for the majority of their energy savings measurement, and the way in which those rules are defined makes a massive difference to how easy, i.e. cheap, or hard, i.e. more expensive, it is to deliver. And of course, the way in which rules are enforced also makes a big difference. So there's lots of reasons why there's a lot of variability between these schemes. And it's also important to note that these are program costs, so they're not wider social cost effectiveness calculations. So we looked at auctions and energy efficiency obligation schemes, or EEOs, and what are the fundamental differences between these two classes of kind of market-based instruments? Well, we looked at two key factors. So one is whether the finances are controlled, so whether there's a budget, and whether there's a savings target. And you can see that on the far left, on the top left, this is where I guess we are at the least market-based end of the spectrum. There's a saving target, there's a savings target, yes, but there's also a budget cap. And this is most obligations in the United States on regulated network utilities, where essentially you do a very big study in advance of agreeing what's going to be delivered. You set a budget which can be then passed through to bill payers, and if the utility ends up doing it more cheaply, then they can make more profit, and if they do it more, and if it costs them more, then they're going to lose out on that part of their operations. So that, I'd say, is probably the least market-based end of the spectrum. Although in Europe, where we see obligations on network utilities, if you then bring in a white certificate market, of course, then that brings a whole new level of market interaction. On the bottom right, or the most market aspect here. So these are capacity market auctions where there's neither a savings target nor a budget, and this is where energy efficiency measures are competing with supply side measures to deliver an energy system objective, i.e. delivering capacity. And so you don't know whether you're going to be delivering a set amount of savings, because it depends how cost effective the energy efficiency measures are, and there's no set budget for the energy efficiency measures themselves. Most of the auctions and obligations actually are on the axis that runs from the top right to the bottom left. So most obligations, at least in the EU, are on competing energy suppliers. And here, there's no set budget. The costs will vary depending on how easy or hard it is for the energy suppliers to meet their obligations. But there is a savings target. So as long as your scheme rules are strong and your penalty regime is strong, you know you're going to meet your savings target. So you're going to deliver a set outcome. At the bottom left, you've got the auctions, and this is where you have the key difference. So here, you will have a budget generally for the energy efficiency measures that you're going to deliver, but you can't guarantee that you're going to meet a particular level of savings, because it will depend on how many people bid in and what the costs per kilowatt hour, or whatever the metric is of delivery. So just summarizing those different, so cost control, these in the auctions, you can remain within a fixed budget. In an EEO, there's no direct control mechanism. But on the other hand, on the energy savings side, the auctions are dependent on the number of bids, and on the EEOs, if the target is well designed and the penalties are enforced, then you should deliver on your target. Just a couple of other things to raise. So on the competition side, with an auction, well, it should be encouraged as long as there are enough bids that are received. On the obligation side, if the obligation is on suppliers, then as long as the energy market is competitive, then you should get competition between suppliers to deliver at least cost and make more profit. And if on the network side, then, as I've described already, white certificate markets can help. Funding on the auction side, well, you can quite easily combine funding pots, but at the same time, funding can be less secure, particularly if it's reliant on annual budget settlements that are needed from a Treasury department. Whereas EEOs, the funding is clearly on energy bills, and the need for obligated parties to pass costs through to end consumers can be reduced by having complementary measures that essentially make it cheaper for them to meet their obligations. And then on the supply chain side, well, for auctions, they may be put off by the short-run funding horizon if that's the case. So there's a real effort, I think, required to with an auction scheme or indeed any kind of grant scheme to sort of give the market some kind of certainty over the future time horizon of support. On the obligation side, they can mean that the supply chain has more certainty if the regulation is set up over the long term. And a well-designed obligation will generally have in primary legislation like a very long time horizon, maybe 10 years, for example, and then you might have shorter time periods of 2, 3, maybe up to 7 years with some of the obligations we've seen in Europe, which just give much more certainty to the supply chain because it's set up through regulation. So there are some differences, at least I see, between auctions and obligations, just in terms of the very kind of high level decision that you might want to make in terms of a choice between the two. But of course, there are lots of other design features that we're going to hear about, hopefully, from our next presenters. So when we looked at the design for auctions and EEOs, we found lots of things that were common between the two. So these are things on the left and at the top. And then at the bottom of the slide, we have some issues that you need to address if you were designing an obligation scheme. On the bottom right, some issues related to auction design. And I would be really interested to hear from our presenters questions around, what the bidding criteria are. Are they established beforehand, which is generally the case with an auction, and then you compete on price? Or with a tender scheme, some of these criteria are assessed together. So along with the price before making a decision on how to dispense funding. Do you have a single price auction? This is the case with capacity market auctions. Basically, everyone is paid the marginal price, i.e. the highest winning bid. Or is it a discriminatory auction? Is everyone essentially paid what they bid? What's the process? Is it just a one-shot auction, or is it like you have in some of these kind of telecoms auctions? Is it a multi-stage auction where people put in an initial exploratory bid, and then you get feedback, and then you put in a second bid? What's the and are there limits, for example, on the costs that you'd be prepared to pay? So all sorts of issues that I'd be very interested in understanding more from our speakers that are coming up, looking at the individual case studies, because I think compared to an obligation scheme, you're basically asking public policymakers to make decisions on things that essentially an obligated party would need to make decisions on in an obligation scheme, which is essentially how to procure energy efficiency and balance competing objectives. So with that, I'm gonna end and pass back to Dario, who will introduce our next speaker. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Sam. Quite clear, and I think it was a great introduction for going into details with our 4 case studies. Of course, it wasn't possible to involve all the auction schemes we have around Europe, but I think we have 4 interesting representatives, even if they are not all pure auction schemes. We'll start with the Switzerland case with Bisang. And I also, in the meantime, I wish to thank all the speakers to be here with us, to dedicate some time to present their case studies and share them with you. And I remind you all that you can ask questions through the dedicated panel in the control panel. So, perfect. The floor is yours.
So, hi everybody. My first question, do you see my presentation?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. So, case study on Switzerland. We have So you should now see some key performance indicators of our efficiency tendering system for 2010 to 2020. We run an auction system since 2010. So far, we supported 708 projects and programs, and we have a yearly electricity saving of around 860 gigawatt hours, and put 270 million euros in it. We have subsidies of around 2.6 euro cents per kilowatt hour electricity saved. We support over 20 different kind of technologies, mainly lighting, motors, cooling systems, heat pumps, circulation pumps, ventilation systems. So how does it work? You know, auctioning from renewables, and how can you do it for energy efficiencies? It's more difficult because you don't have only one technology. You have different target groups. Energy saving measures often have a degree of uncertainty in delivering the savings as compared to energy production. And as in any subsidized scheme, there are possible windfall profits. So that's how one auction works. It's just like any other auctioning process. Business enterprises apply for funds. The public administration then takes a look, is the offer eligible or not? If it is, yes, it comes into a pot of all offers that are eligible. And once we close the pot, we calculate the hammer price. We look at which of the offers are the best and cheapest for us. And we set the price, in our case, a subsidy per kilowatt hour save. And then we compare all offers, which one is cheaper for us than the hammer price, it gets accepted, and which one is more expensive gets rejected. And the main idea of it, of course, is to set a sort of price mechanism. If you compare it to a common subsidized scheme, in a common subsidized scheme, you would say, we offer you 20% of your investment cost as a subsidy. So who do you get? You get all companies that would say, in order to realize my efficiency measure, I need 0 and 20% of my investment cost covered by a subsidy. If someone would need 30% of the investment cost covered, he will not do it because he only gets 20. If someone needs 10% of the investment cost covered, he'll come and he say, okay, great, I get the 20% covered by the investment cost of my investment cost by the subsidy. I gladly take it. And of course, if someone would have done it anyway, he comes and gets the subsidy. With this scheme, people know if they come and apply for a subsidy, they have to tell by themselves how much subsidy do I need. So the person who needs 10% of investment costs covered by subsidy will come and say, Maybe, okay, I could ask for 20, but I just need 10. If I ask for 20%, I'm going to be more expensive. I risk to be rejected and to get nothing. So I maybe just ask for 10 because it's the percentage I need. If it's a person who likes to take risk, the person will maybe say, okay, I try with 15% of the investment cost. So that's the price mechanism in the auction scheme, which makes that for us as a public administration, distributing subsidies will be cheaper than with a normal subsidized scheme. So that's the important point here. You see a number of technologies. How do you put all these technologies in one auction? It's by setting just one criteria, and it's how many cents subsidized do we have to pay per 1 kilowatt hour saved. And the aim is to address significant part of efficiency in all kind of technologies. We have big companies, but we also have households and smaller companies. For households and smaller companies, it's too difficult to participate in an auction. So we have one auction only for programs where an intermediary applies for bundling a number of efficiency measures. So we also can cover efficiency measures in smaller enterprises. And there's the uncertainty in if energy savings are delivered. The thing we do is we only pay once the people show that they implemented the measure, more or less. So we have no penalty if people don't implement the measure, but people just get money if they implemented it. As in any subsidized scheme, you have a lot of windfall profits and an issue of additionality. You see some things we ask for in order to reduce this as much as we can. And the main lesson learned is, why do we do this? Auctioning is to some degree bothersome for companies who apply for funds. It's much easier if they just can come and get a subsidy that's already fixed. They have to think more. Maybe they get a little bit less money. And why do we do this? Because we save public funds, and we can use these saved public funds to subsidize more measures. So for a given public fund, we think we can realize more savings than we could by only distributing subsidies. So that's the main advantage of the tendering schemes. We also have the experience that auctions are robust. Also over time, we repeated a lot of auctioning, and still people submit offers where they try to not to ask for too much funding. It can lead to some frustration of companies that get nothing. As we've seen before, it's a voluntary measure, so it's not useful if you have really a fixed goal of energy savings. Then you should opt for maybe white certificates or something else. So much for the Swiss case study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It was quite clear, and I think we will get some questions in the next minutes. So please feel free to ask questions. We will answer them in the question time at the end of the 4 case studies. So thank you very much, Kirst. And by the way, the presentations will be available on the ENSMOV website, so ensmov.eu, so we'll find them there. And And now it's the turn of the Portuguese case with José Luis Sousa. Please, José, the floor is yours. Okay, presentation is visible.
Okay, hello. So you are seeing the presentation, yes? Thank you. I am, my name is José Sousa. I'm an academic. I'm not with the regulator that manage the Portuguese plan for promoting energy efficiency in end use. So I'm talking to you from a different perspective, although I'll be as truthful as I can regarding the mechanism. My presentation, a little bit of history, how the mechanism has been working so far, also how it works, and some lessons that were learned by the regulator. So we are on our seventh edition. The first two, these vertical lines highlight changes in the regulation, major changes. In the first two, they were every year, and then they became to be biennial. We'll talk about some of the changes later. Now we are receiving propositions until the October 14. How it works? So each promoter that can be electric or gas retailer or RTO, DSO, consumer associations, energy agency, they promote. They cannot be the beneficiary of the measure. They promote the measure. They choose a consumer segment. So how the consumers that be targeted by that will benefit from the measure, as well as the type of the measure and the competition. Then we'll go then later. Okay, so you have the measures are evaluated. They are ordered by the best the performed under the evaluation criteria are placed in the top of the list and by descending order, and then according to the budget that is available, the budget is attributed to the first of the list and the second until it runs out. The measures, we have two types of measures, tangible and intangible measures, soft and hard and soft, sometimes they are called. The tangible intend to the installation of equipment that is above the market standard. It has to be a change market to overcome market barriers. Intangible measures are measures that intend to inform and to give consumers better understanding and information to decide. The tenders, we have 60 different tenders. Each tender has its own budget, and they are organized in this way. We have a tender that is I don't know if you see my okay, let me point. Yes, okay. We have a set of tenders that are any promoter can present measures. Okay, and we have another tender that is exclusive from non-utility promoters that are not electric or gas related enterprises, companies. Okay. In these competitions, we have tangible measures that address industry and agriculture, tangible measures that address commerce and service and households, and also intangible measures. These measures don't compete with each other. They have its own budget, and they are sorted and evaluated and then sorted within these groups, these tenders. From non-utility promoters competitions, we have tangible, intangible measures and tangible measures. Here are each tangible measures address its sector, but they can compete with each other. Okay, so the budget is for all of this, and here we have also a different budget. So you know we have 6 different competitions, 6 different tenders. Regarding the funding, let's see. Okay. The funding is from the use of the system. It's 23 million every 2 years that are allocated for this mechanism. In this edition that is currently going on, the 23 millions are divided this way: 14 millions for tangible for the all promoters tender, and these 14 million are divided: 7 for agriculture and industry, 4 for service and commerce, 3 million for households, 2 million for intangible measures. For non-electric utilities competitions, we have for tangible 4 million and intangible 3 million. That's how the funds are allocated. The criteria, we have 2 different perspectives. We will see it later. So each measure is evaluated in 2 different perspectives: the economic regulation perspective, how to guarantee the most useful use of the public money, and the national energy policy, to see if the measure is aligned with the energy policy objectives. Each measure to be accepted, it has to have a positive in 2 different tests. The primary energy test, this test intends to evaluate if there are savings in primary energy. It's and also net present value test. Okay, so each measure must be positive, have positive results in these 2 evaluations. If the results are positive, then the measure is accepted to the competition and will be evaluated. Now, under 2 different perspectives. We have the perspective from the economic regulation that is performed by the Portuguese energy regulator, and it has its own set of criteria. We will be seeing that later. Also, the government member will be analyze the measures according to some objectives regarding the national energy policy. The economic regulation criteria, it's different if we are talking about tangible or intangible measures. So tangible measures, they are evaluated under cost-benefit analysis, and the weight of the investment in equipment. So the total cost of a measure, to avoid that the administrative costs are high in regard when compared to the money that will be allocated to the equipment. Intangible measures are informative measures, measures that don't have the installation of equipment. They are intended to increase the awareness of people around energy efficiency. And we have a set of criteria, such the ability to overcome market barriers. People know more about energy efficiency and can have a multiplier effect, so you can go beyond the measure itself. The quality of the presentation, every consumer is addressed equally, innovation and easy to implement. Also, the energy policy objectives criteria. It's a national wide coverage to see if a measure is addressing only a city, or it can be applied to all all Portugal, all the national territory. There it's aligned with the energy policy and the legislation. Support for developments on energy, on the implementation of measures to promote energy efficiency. Diversification of promoters in order to allow that more promoters are beneficiary of the mechanism and the funds, and the coordination with other instruments, policy instruments. The selection of the measures. So these two set of criteria from the economic perspective and the policy perspective, they are evaluated, and the final result is an average of the results that are given by these two set of criteria, these two perspectives. It's then we have each measure with an overall performance value. They are sorted by descending order, the most valued in the top, and decreasing the order, and then the funds are allocated for the starting at the top of the list until the funds, the budget are run out. So this is performed in each one of those 6 tenders. Okay. Some lessons that were learned so far. So in the beginning, the competition were only for utility, and then only electricity utilities, and with there was only one competition where all promoters could apply, and then it was verified that electric utilities were the ones that get the funds. Okay, so they created another competition from non-utilities, only to enterprises that or associations that are not in the electric or gas sector. So in order to allow that to disseminate and to have other promoters. Each promoter, each measure has a promoter, can have a partner, and also a beneficiary. The promoter cannot be the beneficiary of the measure. For instance, an example, a higher education institution can design a measure that will be applied to a municipality. Okay. Biennial tenders, in the beginning, the first 2 they were annual, the submission of the measures, although the measures could be implemented in 2 or 3 years, up to 3 years. But it was a lot of the work for the promoters that were each year they were promoting or designing new measures, and also dealing with implementation of the already accepted. So the tenders became biennial every 2 years. Okay, that gives time for the promoters to implement the measure, and then when the measure is implemented, they can start thinking about new ones, learning from the previous and thinking about new ones. The national energy policy criteria, since we have talking about public funds, it is important that they are in line with the energy policy criteria. So we have now this criteria regarding this set of these objectives. Over the time criteria and the weights of that criteria in the overall evaluation. For instance, for tangible measures, we had seven criteria, I guess. Now we have only 2 under the economic perspective. So the evaluation and the criteria has been evolving. We have a mandatory measurement and verification plan. Each measure must have a measurement and verification plan in order to see if the results are in line with the expectations. The regulator can perform audits when it's feasible and he wants to has any doubts, or randomly he can pick different accepted and implemented measures to see if the results are in line. Only technologies that are above the market standard can be financed. For instance, market standard for lighting systems is now it's the CFL. No, so no more money for CFLs, only for LEDs and up. So the new technologies must. It's a way of passing the market barriers. Mounting funding limits. Here, they're both the promoter, the participant, or the partner must share the costs. The public funds from PPAC, PPAC, can go up to 75% of the cost of the measure for tangible measures and 95% for intangible measures. The other costs must be from the beneficiaries, the consumers, or from the promoter or partner. Also, there are limits to the value that each measure receives. For instance, from the competition of all promoters, intangible measures must receive up to 400,000 euros, and for tangible measures 800,000 euros. And there's a limit, no, that cannot be suppressed. And now from this competition, this tender on, we also have gas. Until now, only the mechanism only addresses electric energy. Some results from our last edition. There were 224 measures, representing 61.5 million euros, 79 promoters, 107 partners. From these were selected 75 measures from the 224, 49 tangible and 26 intangible, involving 32 partners. If you consider only tangible measures, we have, because we can make the calculations, yes, we have 97 million euros of benefits, avoided consumption and emissions, financed by 18 million of from PayPack and 35 million overall. So the cost of these measures that give us a benefit of evaluating on 97 millions were invested 35 millions, 18 millions of public money. Also, around 1,300 gigawatt hours of lifetime savings, around 500,000 tonnes of CO2. Also, the cost of the avoided kilowatt hour for tangible measures, you have the average of the measures that were selected to be financed. You have a cost of 1.2 cents for each kilowatt hour. In the all promoters, we have 1.3 cents for kilowatt hours. For tangible measures, 1.6, and here we have 1.5 overall. And that's all. Thank you for listening, and I'll be available for answer the questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, José. It was very interesting, and you saw that there were some similarities, but also many differences between the two schemes that have been illustrated till now. And now we move on towards the third case study, which relates to Denmark. So Morten Broberg from the Danish Energy Agency. Yeah. Please, Morten. Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's get started. My name is Morten Broberg. I am Chief Advisor in Danish Energy Agency. Been that for I think 4 years or something like that. Before that, I was at Dong Energy and doing some of the same stuff. Yes. Let's get going. We have a scheme, auction-based scheme in Denmark up and running already, and I'm going to present it. And first, I'll give a disclaimer saying that in 15 minutes time, it's impossible to get into all the details and describe the scheme in total. So what you'll see here is just a glimpse of what we have and what we have been doing. Yes, I'm just gonna click on, hope you can see it. This is our, can you see the screen?
Yeah, yes, we
okay,
can.
Good. This is just a quick show of the web sphere that we built for our scheme, where companies can apply and go to the auction. We have built the scheme here, and if you are interested in details, you can just and when the presentation goes public, you can just click here. Yes. Basics. It's a scheme that is running well from 2020. We started a wee bit before time because of Corona and stuff. So we needed to get money out to the business, and it ends in 2029. It's state funded. We have for the first 4 years we have 80 million euros per year, 1 year with 40 and 4 years with 26. It's a moving target, the numbers, because the agenda is more green in Denmark too. So we started with a smaller budget actually, but it kept on getting bigger and bigger. So that's the numbers right now. It's energy savings done under Article 7, and it's under the General Block Exemption Regulations. It is supposed to deliver 60% of the total Danish EEG obligation, and it's run solely in-house by ourselves, by the state. Before that, we had this energy efficiency obligation scheme which I know some people also among you are interested in, but I'm not gonna go into details with that now, because it'll take too long time to describe in detail why we did what we did. Yeah. Next, it's a competitive subsidy scheme addressed to private enterprises, and it's all user energy that we are addressing. We have some certain sectors we have not in the scheme, that is, as you can see, road transportation, shipping, and then savings in the IT sector. Even though energy consumption in the IT sector is increasing and is quite large now as a percentage, it's simply in the first take of this scheme, we think it's well, because of some experiences on the older scheme, it's too complicated to calculate energy savings when you have equipment that is being taken in and out of these big warehouses every maybe 2 or 3 years. So, and that's a kind of additionality approach to that. The subsidy is granted based on the bidding per saved kilowatt hours in individual projects, and then we have this staircase where the lowest one comes first, and then so forth down. The auction in itself, we have 4 to 5 web-based auctions per year. This year we had 4 auctions. And each auction cycle is 21 days. For 14 days, there's an open bidding process where they bid and they give their basic information, what kind of company they are, project type, energy category, energy savings, longevity of the savings, amount of savings, and of course, it sums up to the actual bid. We put a cap on the bid at approximately 1 cent per kilowatt hour per year. After the 14 days, we close the bidding. We have a 7-day standstill where we need to clean data and verify some of the biddings. Still, some of the bidders make mistakes about kilowatt hours and megawatt hours and such. So we see some very large energy savings at a very cheap, very small bids, and that's because they got the numbers wrong. Well, finally, there was an announcement after 7 days where the bidders, all the bidders will receive a letter saying that the last bid past the post was a certain number, typical a little less than 1 cent per kilowatt hours, and then they can move on with their project. We call it, as you can see here, phase 2, where they will send in their I can just show it in the next, no, sorry, where they will show more in detail their the project that they have been bidding on behalf of. And there we do the calculations, anything that can be measured. It must be end user energy, but if it's a boiler to a heat pump, or it's light bulbs that are being shifted, or if it's biomass projects and stuff. But anything that uses end user energy and can reach a higher efficiency rate is a go in this setup. As you can see, just a quick glimpse on the process. I saw I think it was the Swiss one. You had a process too, saying maybe it was a year. We have that from the granting of the subsidy, which will take place, as you can see, approximately here, then they, from the grant, the time of the granting, they will be given approximately 2 years and 3 months to make their project to reality. And we pay when they are done and when we are satisfied with the project. Quick glimpse of the design. We were giving a design in frame 2018. It should be a competitive subsidy scheme on energy savings related to private enterprises, and all the savings must be comparable to Article 7, the one that is working now. And then they put a cap on 1 cent per kilowatt hour per year, so the competition could never run amok in high prices. Then we had a first draft on our design where we said it should be an auction scheme based on generic energy savings and not project identified end user savings, and private enterprises and intermediaries could compete. Intermediaries here you can see in the larger scope as market actors. That was the first draft, and the second and final draft, we addressed some of, we identified some hurdles. One was that if you are not knowing what the bids actually are as project identified, then we could look into that some will bid with biddings that were too high just because they could, and that means that if, for instance, somebody bid and said they had a project of 10 million kilowatt hours and the real world was maybe it was 3 million kilowatt hours, then because of the design they will come along with 10 million kilowatt hours, and we could not deploy the rest of the money for the missing 7 million kilowatt hours before the project came in and showed that it was not 10 million kilowatt hours, it was 3 million kilowatt hours. So there was a hit rate we were afraid of would be too low on how many actual energy savings that will come after maybe 2 years first. We could see it. And then there are no sanctions in this scheme. Well, the sanction is if you do not comply to the rules and realize, and you do not, and your project does not get realized, well, there's no money then. But else there are no sanctions. And we had on the second one, the private enterprises compete. We took out the intermediaries, the market actors. There were 2 main obstacles. One was the problem that market actors or intermediaries could have this situation where they will have an overcompensation when we looked at the specific project that they had been bidding in with. And why would they have that? Well, that's because maybe they had been at a factory and identified 3 projects and spent resources and money and so on all 3 projects, but only one came to life, and they needed the money to be paid also on the 2 that did not come into life, and that will of course show in the 3rd project that came into life. And it was impossible for us to see how we could address that. And then we were afraid that it would be a lock-in of the subsidy scheme. So actors, market actors, intermediaries will be sitting on too much of the subsidy instead of the enterprises, the factories and stuff. And this learning came from the older energy obligation scheme, where the last maybe 4 years of the former scheme, market actors were actually providing maybe 70% of energy savings on behalf of the obligated parties in the former scheme. after final design approved, we built. We took stakeholder involvement. Of course, stakeholder involvement has been going on also in the design phase, but it accelerated in the building phase. I'll say it's more than 50+ meetings with enterprises and intermediaries, market actors, and so on. They had a say on final design, on some of the rules, calculation methods, and here I can say on experience that this is where you should really put some time into to the phase of building a system, because if you want it to have a success, if you want it to be used, it's very important to build something that the market and those who you want to bid can see themselves in. So it's very good. It's time well spent on this stakeholder involvement. Legislation, we built executive orders, guidance notes, standard solutions. It's all in the web site now. And then on the IT, we did an add-on on an existing platform that was used, has been used on to subsidy schemes and such. And here again, and never ever underestimate the time and the problems that you will face during the build and during the actual operational mode when you have a scheme. Yes, finally, we went into implementation operation mode in August, September 2020. We built up the department. We have 20+ engineers. I know I haven't said it, but the kilowatt hours that we are paying for are kilowatt hours that are calculated or metered, measured energy savings. As I said before, if you have an oil and gas boiler and convert it to a heat pump, there's quite a big energy saving, and you can do the calculations on certain assumptions on before scenarios and after scenarios, and then up comes a number of energy savings per year, and then we transfers it to lifetime of the savings, which will have to take into account, of course, the additionality rules that is in the new EED. This means, for instance, that if you have a gas boiler that you transfers to a heat pump, we will say the yearly energy savings times 10 years if it's a total switch. We have built some lifetime guidance, and yes. October we went live last year. The first auction had 300+ bids, and it was approximately 20 million that we ended up giving in subsidy for that auction. And now, as we are speaking today, we closed for 14 days ago. We closed the final auction for this year. We had 4 auctions this year, and we closed it now. And why are we closing? Why are we having a final auction in September and not further into the year? That's because we need to just go way back. We need to give this grant within the same financial year. That's government rules. So we need to look at all the bids and all the specific projects coming from the bids in this year and give the subsidy grant in this year. So that means we are always being pressed up the wall at mid-December also this year. That's why we are doing it this way. If we could, we would like to have auctions maybe in October, in October too, but that's not possible right now. Okay, Pros and cons. Well, the pros is, of course, there's competition, and it's quite a clear competition because everybody knows what they are competing on. They're competing on the lowest bids on kilowatt hours, and we are paying at, as I say, at delivery when the energy savings are realized, and we can go out to the factory and see the new heat pump in function. Basically, yes, we can pay, and they'll get their subsidy. The cons is that if you build an auction scheme and want competition, it's nice if there is competition, and if there's no competition, as we are not having that much of a competition right now, then they will all seek the numbers that are close to the cap, as is approximately 1 cent. So the spread of the bids are not that large. They are all seeking a little less than 1 cent, because the market, of course, it's Denmark, it's 6 million people, it's a small market, so the market knows basically if there's a competition or no competition. We think that one of the reasons why we are having less competition is because of the times, Corona times, uncertainty in the world. So the first thing an enterprise is thinking of is maybe not so much buying new energy efficient equipment, but just to survive the next year. So we'll probably see an upswing next year. That said, we are still looking at that we have been giving grants for approximately 50% of the total for this year. So we are not happy, but we are not sad about the situation, because we know that there are some quite obvious reasons why we are not seeing a full competition yet. Cons further, that is, there are no, as I said before, there are no sanctions. If they bid and say they have 10 million kilowatt hours that they can deliver in 2 years' time, and they do not go on with the project, even though they won the bid, there are no sanctions. And then just, of course, we have systems built in that will reach out to them, I think every 6 months, to ask them to give us a report. What is the status of your project? So the sooner we can get that status, the sooner we can deploy the not spent money to a new auction and to other companies. So, and there are no guarantees for the savings. It's a little bit as before. And then timing of the auctions. If you ask the market, the enterprises, the intermediaries, and the actors, they would like to have it open 24/7 and just a cap on give them a certain number, like 0.8 cents or something like that on savings. They do not like this setup that much, because they say that it brings them uncertainty. They do not know how much money, until they have been bidding, that they actually can get, and they would like to have more auctions if they could, but we still have to, as I showed before, we still have to be true to this setup, and that means we can only press so many auctions in a whole year. That's something we are working on continually. We are already working on version, well, not version 2.0, but maybe 1.5. The world is changing, and I've been in this business for, I think, maybe 20 years now, and the word is not as much energy savings anymore than to go green. And you do not need to have energy savings to go green. If you transfer from a gas boiler to a biomass, we can have a long discussion about how nice it is to go to biomass, but that's another story. But what we can see is happening in, I can only speak for Denmark, of course, is that it's more important to address the CO2 now than to address the kilowatt hours. And we are in the new version thinking of addressing CO2 too, if we can make a hybrid on that. But of course, we have this basic design frame saying that we must deliver energy savings according to and compliable with Article 7. That's the presentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Morten. It was also quite interesting. There are many questions for you, and okay, we'll come back to that
Yes.
in the end. Now it's the turn of Christos Tourkolias from CRES for our last case study for today. So please, Christos.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
Just a moment to share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Dario. Hello to everyone. I'm very happy that I have the opportunity to present our attempt toward the design of the energy efficiency auction scheme in Greece. I'm very happy also that because I saw that a lot of design elements which have been introduced into ours have already been tested for the case of Denmark, because we know that it's a very difficult attempt undertaking, and the effective design will minimize, let's say, the potential barriers after the implementation. In Greece, we decided to introduce energy efficiency auction scheme during the preparation of the National Energy Climate Plan. The reason was our, let's say, inability to fulfill the target within the framework of Article 7 in the period 2014-20. We expect a deviation, let's say, some approximately 30%. So we realized that we need additional measures, more effective measures, in order to fulfill the more ambitious energy efficiency target. Moreover, due to the fact that the cost effectiveness of specific measures, such as the energy upgrade of public building, was too much. It was higher than other one. We lead us to the decision to improve the cost effectiveness. So the market-based instruments have the ability to improve the cost effectiveness of the implemented measures, and of course to increase the possibility as a country to fulfill the targets. Moreover, we want to design this scheme so as to operate as a permanent structure for implementing all the energy efficiency measures as a permanent structure. And of course, along with the energy efficiency obligation scheme, to promote the market-based mechanism, and of course, to enhance the energy services market. As you know, in Greece, it's not so mature. For this reason, in 2019, we established a working group. I participate in this, having as main task to formulate recommendation about the design of the energy efficiency auction scheme. Despite the let's say, the typical obligation of the working groups, this working group has the obligation, of course, to conduct all the required public consultation activities with all the stakeholders, to arrange ad hoc meetings with experts, and of course to conduct external studies so as to collect the required data for the effective design and initiation of the scheme. In this diagram, you can see all the duties, let's say, which includes the mapping of the existing barriers, the identification of the most effective type of interventions which will be promoted through the energy efficiency auction scheme, to propose, let's say, the most effective design elements, to develop the appropriate measurement verification procedures, and finally, to prepare all the required documents and the respective legislative framework for the initiation of the schemes. And of course, as you see later, this working group will participate also in the monitoring of the initial implementation of the energy efficiency auctions. Moreover, we examined the previous schemes, not only in Europe. We saw the case of Portugal and Switzerland. We studied Germany. We had a meeting where the designed approach in Denmark we discussed with us. So we had an initial, let's say, overview of this attempt, but we studied a lot of schemes across the world, and especially in USA. So to summarize, when we designed this scheme, of course, as I mentioned, we want to promote the most cost-effective energy efficiency intervention, but simultaneously, we want to reduce the administrative cost and the bureaucracy, and of course, to ensure the transparency and the fair competition among the involved companies. As I mentioned, we have already ended the procedure for the preparation of the required tendering documents, and we have resulted in this 7-step procedure for the conduction of the energy efficiency auction scheme. I haven't said a lot of information in this presentation. Due to the time restriction, I will focus only the most important. First of all, in the first step, which refers to the preparation of the scheme, first of all, it's important to assign the responsible authority. For our case, the Ministry of Environment and Energy has been appointed as the responsible authority body, while it's very crucial to publicize all the required guidance and the documentation about the implementation of all steps within the framework of these energy efficiency auction schemes. It is foreseen the submission of separate technical and financial bids from the involved companies, while the minimum contents of the technical bids were discussed and we have been decided, focuses, especially in the technical part, on the description of the baseline, the methodology for the estimation of delivered energy savings, the time plan, etc., while emphasis will be given due to the fact that these schemes will be reported within the framework of Article 7 of the new directive, to ensure that all the technical issues which are foreseen in Annex 5 of the directive, we will manage to comply with so as to be in compliance with them. The minimum contents of the financial bids will determine, focus not only on the budget, but on the required public support and the expected payback period in the case that this will be set as a prerequisite in the scheme. We have developed specific templates so as to facilitate the homogeneous completion of the technical financial bid. In the case that we insert the obligation to report the payback period, we will use predefined standard energy cost values for all the participants, while in regards to the submission, we will follow the sealed bid approach under a single-step procedure where the applicants will submit electronically the technical and financial bids. In every step, we foresee adequate period for the preparation of the submission of them, having in mind not to prolong the overall duration of the scheme. In the second step, the evaluation of the submitted application will be conducted. This will be done by the responsible authority, which for the first pilot scheme round will be the administrator of renewable energy and guarantee of origins, the PEP. But due to the fact that we speak for a difficult and knowledge demanding area, this responsible authority will be supported by the technical evaluation committee, where will be composed by dependent members, including the members of the working group. So this technical evaluation committee will support the responsible authority. In this round, the first selection of the companies will be done with regards to specific technical and financial competence criteria, while emphasis will be given on assessing the accuracy of the technical bid with regards to the expected energy savings, the utilized methodology, the assumptions, and the feasibility of the proposed time plan, while in the case that we detect some mistakes, we will allow the correction of them under the prerequisite that the new energy savings are not so different from the initial declared, and we think that a threshold of up to 5% will be rational for this case. In this slide, you can see some technical competence criteria and financial competence criteria which can be used. The first selection includes the minimum number of successfully completed projects having a specific minimum budget, or due to the fact that we speak for technical companies, they acquire degree and contractor class, or for the case of the financial competence criteria, there is the idea to ask for a minimum turnover or a minimum capital, or to prove the availability of the financial sources, and of course to take into account potential abusive behaviors or cases with mismanagement of state aid rules. Moreover, we provide the opportunity to the applicants to object in the case that do not agree with the results, and of course a specialized committee for assessing the objection will be established. In the third step, we will have the conduction of the energy efficiency auctions for the companies which will manage to pass the second step. The energy efficiency auction will be conducted taking into account the cost effectiveness ratio as the only award criterion, and this cost effective ratio will be calculated through the required public support and the declared energy savings in the technical bid. We will set a selling price, but especially for the first pilot rounds, we do not have the intention to foresee segmentation of the energy efficiency target, to impose obligation for minimum or maximum size of projects, while the applicants will have the obligation to submit only one financial bid. The responsible authority in the third step will be the same with the second and with the fourth steps, as we saw later, and the rationale for the evaluation will be to rank the submitted bids in ascending orders according to the cost effectiveness ratio, and starting from the bids for the bid with the lowest, we will estimate the cumulative energy savings until the fulfillment of the specified energy saving target in the specific round. Of course, we will allow excess of the energy savings, and in the case that the transfer of the remaining budget, yes, there is the remaining budget, this will be transferred to the next round. We will utilize, such in the case of Denmark, pays as bid model, while we will foresee a maximum number of mandatory working days for completing all the activities from the responsible authority. And such in the case of Denmark, we will develop a long-term roadmap, including at least 2 auction rounds on annual basis, so as to giving the opportunity to the potential investors to organize their strategy. After the completion of the third step, the winners will sign the contract with the responsible authority. We tend to provide advanced payment only in financial bids which exceed specific budget levels, while the submission of performance letter of guarantee will be mandatory, and we tend to set this payment equal to approximately 5% of the awarded public support. After the signature of the contract, we continue with the fifth step, where the winners companies will implement the foreseen energy efficiency interventions according to the technical bid. The companies will oblige to submit a progress report to the responsible authority. In step 5 and 6, CRES will be responsible and responsible authority for this, while after the completion of all energy efficiency interventions, the companies are obliged to submit the final completion report indicating the completion of the procedure. In regards to the period which will be used in order to complete the energy efficiency improvement intervention will be aligned with the declared time plan in the technical bid, while we will foresee 2 different penalties, one for the case that a delay will exist in regards to the completion of the energy efficiency improvement, and a second one in regards to the lack of cumulative energy savings in relation to the energy efficiency. In any case, the reduction will be applied on the awarded public support, take into consideration the current progress, the current ability to fulfill the energy saving targets. Yes, in the 6th step, we have the control and validation of the achieved energy savings. As I said, CRES will be responsible for this step. We have decided to follow the identical procedure, control and verification procedures, which are implemented within the framework of the Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme, so as to be in full compliance with the technical requirements of Article 7 of the ED. The CRES will be responsible to start the control and verification activities after the submission of the final completion report from the company. While we will foresee a specific maximum number of mandatory working days for CRES so as to complete all the control and verification activities. Due to the fact that we have to comply with the technical aspects of Article 7, we tend to use the 4 proposed methods within ED, deemed metered scale surveyed savings. We have conduct a general bibliographical analysis, collecting information about different measurement or alternative type of measurement protocol or approaches, such as have been collected in various other projects, such as EPADE, where we can see these results. While for the verification and control processes, we will follow the initial one, which has been, I apologize, but we have a lot of calls in multi-project, and we follow in CRES as administrator. Emphasis will be given on the sample size and the representativeness, so we will ensure that a specialized control system will be implemented, including the independent verification of a statistically significant proportion of the energy efficiency improvement measures. And finally, after the completion of the control and verification activities, the responsible authority, the PEP, which is responsible for step 2, 3, and 4, will pay the company, yes, while emphasis will be given on the compliance with the state aid rules. This is a general overview of the foreseen steps in the energy efficiency auction scheme. As I said, a very tricky point is the compliance with the state aid rules. According to the current directive, one alternative is to comply with the general block exemption regulation, but in the case that we focus on tertiary industrial sector, this leads to a specific maximum aid intensity which can be given, having as outcome not to be so attractive for the companies. Moreover, there is the alternative to prepare a formal notification to the European Commission asking higher aid intensity, but this is a procedure which is both time and resource consuming, or to use the de minimis regulation, but we have the problem for the maximum cap of 2,000 euros, which is not sufficient, let's say, for the case of tertiary and industrial sector. Ideally, we believe that the common rules which are foreseen for the case of RED, for the RED auction scheme, must be followed and for energy efficiency auction scheme, so as to the provided support not to be considered as state aid due to the fact that the aid is granted to individual all measures which are open to all enterprises, and only an official communication with DG competition will be adequate so as to initiate the scheme. So this is something which can be done legislative at European level so as to facilitate the more extensive conduction of energy efficiency auctions. As I said, the first pilot rounds of the energy efficiency auction scheme will focus on tertiary sector, private office or hotels, and the selection of the measurement protocol will define all the majority of the technical aspects which must be quantified, such as selling price, the target, etc., and of course the required control and verification items. This scheme will contribute exclusively to fulfill the energy efficiency target within the framework of Article 7, so the priority will be given on the interventions which lead to the final energy savings, but we examine the possibility to allow the simultaneous implementation of RES project so as to improve, so as to increase the level playing field with RES and to maximize the synergies between energy efficiency and RES. But the priority will be given on the energy efficiency interventions, and in the measurement we will take into consideration the fact that NRES are supported also. So the next steps, we expect to finalize the harmonization of Directive 2002 of 2018. We have a delay for approximately 1 year, and it's important for us because this law sets the required legislative framework for our schemes. After the adoption of this law, we will complete the draft outline of the tendering procedure. We will launch a public consultation round so as to discuss with all the stakeholders. We will establish the secondary regulatory framework. The majority of these have already been prepared. And finally, we intend to launch the energy efficiency auction, the first pilot route, in the middle of 2022. Thank you for your attention. I'm at your disposal for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Christos. I think your presentations were very tailored for people involved in the design of a new scheme like you, as a sort of index to follow, even if, of course, the decision could be different. Okay, we have many questions, so I will start with the first speakers and then go on maybe with more general questions. The first one for Kurt is, okay, if I understand well, you define the hammer price after you get the offers. And so you don't set a reference price or a cap in advance. This way you can stimulate competition, whatever the number of proponents, because one of the issues we heard about in our speeches was the risk that there is not enough competition. Is that true?
I'm not sure if I get the question right, but two answers. One is, of course, in each auction round, the hammer price has to be different, and people who submit an offer should not have a clue how high the hammer price is. Another thing is we need enough competition. We have a yearly budget, a sum of money we can put into the auction scheme. We usually have more money we could grant than demand. We have up to 50 million euro. We only grant around 35 million euro a year. So what we do is for each round, we say if we don't have enough competition through the budget, anyhow, we are going to exclude a part of the proposals. So people have to be aware that they risk to not get a fund. And we set this limit very low. So we only exclude about a sixth of the offers, but it's working. It's working well enough. It puts a pressure on people not to submit the maximal possible subsidy.
So it is interesting because it is working even if you don't have enough bidders in each auctions. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I think this is a good suggestion for many other colleagues of yours. José, does the regulator define market standard of eligible technologies, or is this up to the proponent? Were there any issues about this? José, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand that the question was for me. Yes, yeah, there are technologies that are accepted. The market standards are not accepted. So the technology that is proposed must be above market standard, and the proposal to install equipment must there are for instance self-consumption. Photovoltaic for self-consumption is not allowed if the energy has to go to the energy grid, the public grid. But if you have self-consumption associated with energy efficiency measure, then the measure can be accepted. So there are some restrictions regarding the proposals. I don't know if I answered the question. Didn't I?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Then there are 4 questions for Morten, and the first one is about the cap. So 1 cent per kilowatt hour per year looks quite low, and so the question is it based on a lifetime calculation or a first year savings only? And is it 1 euro cent or is it 1 cent of the Danish crown? No, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, the last one first. It's of course a euro cent, and it's for 1 kilowatt hour one time. That means the first year savings. But as I said in the presentation, we are doing this lifetime calculation on the specific energy saving actions. So as I said in an example, the boiler that goes to a heat pump, we put in 10 years on that, so that's 10 cent. And then we calculate it backwards to net present value, and that means when we do this interest rate with, I think it's 3% now, going back, that it ends up with that they are giving a grant per that transfers into maybe, what are we looking at, maybe 7 cents for 1 kilowatt hour when it lasts 10 years. That's the way to level energy saving actions that have different, from our side, defined lifespans. So we have energy saving action that lasts only 4 years when it's optimization of equipment, and then we have 8 years when it's total or more deeply optimization, I would say, and when it's a total makeover, a shift from a boiler to a heat pump, we give them 10 years. But that's how to have a level the competition. So we transfer it. You can say, what do we want? We want as many savings as possible, as cheap as possible. But we are not interested in if they last a long time per action or short time. What we do, because we can transfer it and calculate it and say we make it into a 1 year savings. It took some time for the market to understand that method, because in the old scheme they were granted approximately 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and it didn't matter almost how long the actual energy saving action lasted. And of course, when we are talking lifespans, we have to comply to the additionality rules in the EED. And if I think that in this designing phase anything was difficult, it's damn difficult to design around additionality. And the guidance notes on 93 pages is not helping that much, frankly to say. Okay. I'll just go on with the other questions. Is that okay?
The second one is if the savings are listed in the application verified once the project is implemented.
Well, it's because of it's under Article 38 General Block and Station Regulations. As Christos showed, there is some caps on small, medium, and large companies, 30, 40, 50%. So we need to document how much the energy saving scheme has costed. That's invoices coming to us. If it's big projects, it's 500 invoices. We make them into that. An accountant will have to verify the investment size and stuff. So what we pay for, and we only pay when the project is done. We pay for stuff that comes up in the factories, and we can go out and tap it on the boiler and say, okay, you are there now, and we paid for it. So that's and that was also in the older scheme. It's I know there's a question if we pay for some upfront, and we do not. We pay when we have the stuff in the ground. Yeah.
The other part was about the sanctions. So we saw that, for example, in Christos' proposal, there are sanctions in case the projects are not implemented as foreseen. You mentioned that this is a problem, and the question is if you have considered the possibility to have proponents pay to present the offer. But of course, it's not the same thing, but it is something that could discourage.
Well, I've been in this for maybe 20 years, and the larger energy saving projects are never ending up where they started, never ever, because when you start to strip apart and look into your old energy equipment and you want some new things happen, and you need to have maybe another approach. You find out the numbers are not as you thought they were. So anything, it will happen, and if we are not realizing that this is the nature of energy savings projects, then nothing will happen in the way that we can support it, because our scheme is said to be that we are only doing the numbers smaller when they come into us. But that's because the nature of the scheme is that they will try to bid with as many kilowatt hours as possible in a realistic frame, because they know that when the realistic scenario comes into play, when they start to do the real implementation, things will happen and numbers will get smaller. We do not pay for more than what is realized in the final end. So if they apply for 10 million kilowatt hours and when we reach the end station see it's only 8 million kilowatt hours, they get paid for 8 million kilowatt hours. The reverse side of the coin is that we do not pay if they come with more. So if they said it was 10 and it ended up with 12, we are not paying for the last 2 because we cannot that, because we had this auction where we said so much money to so many bidders, so we do not have the money. We are trying to see if we can make a setup where we are overbooking in the auctions, because we know the hit rate is never 100%. The hit rate is maybe, I don't know, well, 70% or something like that. So we can do that. So the companies can see themselves even more in this scheme, saying that okay, if we do it better, there's still a payment. So that's an ongoing design.
Yeah. And I imagine this is a problem, especially if you try to measure the savings and not just to, let's say, quantify it in advance and give the incentive on the results.
We tend to, the larger projects and the larger the numbers, we like to get a more realistic scenario. So sometimes when we give the grant, we give it the grant on permission that actually the savings are metered, are measured for let's say 3 months. So we remove some uncertainty, because some of the projects we are granting, they are coming into life 4 years from now, and 4 years, that's a long time before something comes into life. And if we can have a granting saying, okay, we can do this. We can give you a grant, but the grant is on permission that we can have some better numbers when we reach the end station of the project.
Okay, there was a last question. That was about if companies have to wait for the result of the auction before implementing the project, if they can start before, etc.
Well, that's a no-go when you look at the additionality rules in Article 7. So that's we are looking at that they can start some of the implementation when they have made the bid and have had the announcement letter, and then they can start, but they still have to go through the process that we need to have a good feeling in our stomach before we give the final grant. But many of one of the main problems for larger projects is that they need to get going and order the equipment, because the equipment is maybe 6 months away from order time. And if they need to wait 2 months or 3 months before we give the final grant on the project, then we are just so we are trying to make that smarter. Yeah. We have a lot of lessons. I can tell you, if you want to hear me, we have a lot of lessons already.
Yeah, of course. And I think that limit you have to spend the money within the fiscal year is quite a challenging one. From this
we want to we are addressing that too, but that's we're not going to change the state in that. No.
I see that there are 2 comments, one from Samuel and one from Christos. So Sam, please.
Thank you. Great set of questions. I just wanted to ask Morten actually whether he was attracted by the description that Kurt gave of the bidding mechanism, whereby they don't publish kind of a ceiling price in advance, and they seem to get a wider spread of bids. I wondered whether that was something that you might consider introducing in Denmark at some point.
We have the cap on 1 cent approximately, but we are seeing, I know I said in the presentation that we are seeing that they are like this in the bids, but we are seeing some outliers where they are bidding only a fifth of that amount. But that's mainly when we look into the numbers and why they do it, because why will you not apply for maximum if you know that the competition is weak? And that has again to do with Article 38 on GBR, because they can hit the intensity loft of 30%. We have this additionality doors. One of the doors is that the project in itself must at least have a 2-year payback time. So if they ask for too much, they go under the floor. So when we can simply now see that the market is, I can tell you, the market is working, because some of the bidding is a very funny number, and when you do the numbers, you can see that's because they are now reaching 49.5% of state aid, and because they are SNV or something like that. So I think that's nice to know that the market knows the rules and apply to the rules, and then we can try to design and say, can we do something smarter? What's important to understand here is that the same energy saving action can then be granted a lot more if you are a small company and have this energy saving action being done than if you are a larger company. I think that's something that if we are talking about how to do things right, should be further down the line, maybe addressed in some of the general rules on this, because that's, I mean, that's funny, or maybe not funny, that's strange. I think that the same energy saving action, giving the same CO2, giving the same kilowatt hours, that depends on if you are a large company or a small company.
Christos.
Yes, a brief comment. We have to be very careful with the state aid rules. For example, you cannot finance companies for intervention which have been applied in the previous, before the provision of the public support. So we have a lot of restriction by the state aid. I agree with Morten that we have to comply with the technical requirements. Additionality is a very crucial issue, but we have to comply with the state aid rules. For this reason, we believe that the identical framework must be applied for energy efficiency, such in the case of CRES. But I believe that we do not have, especially for the companies, to report interventions the year before the provision of the public support. So emphasis must be given on the detailed design of the scheme. It's not an easy scheme. In Greece, we are happy because we are the same team that we design energy efficiency application scheme. So we have, let's say, somehow the same understanding about the challenges, the problems, the difficulties which must be addressed. And step by step, I'm very happy that a lot of these design elements seems to be operational in the case of Denmark. So I think it's a very good indication. And as I said in the first slide, the real target for Greece, due to the public funds are not sufficient, adequate for fulfilling the target, is to improve the cost effectiveness of the measures and to be able to fulfill the target. For this reason, I say that this mechanism must be integrated in all alternative measures so as to improve the cost effectiveness of all of them. Not to treat it as a specific scheme, but to integrate the main rationale. With this rationale, this mechanism lead you to the lowest cost effectiveness, to be integrated into all alternative measures.
Okay. Since we run out of time, I'd like to ask a final comments from all of you, if you want. And so, do you have any suggestion for a colleague of yours, maybe are designing a new scheme, on what is the most important things to take into account in that phase? And also, what do you think about the effort needed for designing and managing this kind of schemes with auctions with respect to more traditional schemes? I think we can start with Kurt, so that we go in the usual order.
Well, maybe two things. You should try to learn from one year to the next. You can improve the scheme and profit from your experiences. Probably you should be a little bit more flexible than with a traditional funding scheme. And another thing is profit from the experience from colleagues in other countries, as we did today. So share your insights and don't hesitate if you think you can, you have questions or you could profit from our experiences. Send an email and ask.
Thank you very much. I think this is really welcome for all the audience and also your colleagues. And José.
Hi. Before we had this voluntary scheme, we had an obligation scheme between 2002 and 2005. Yeah. And it was only on public electric utilities. So with the change, we managed to address a lot more public, more enterprises were involved, were aware, and are getting better each edition. For instance, in 2007, the public funds covered 85% of the costs of the measures. And in average, in last 2017-18, public funds covered 56%. So although they can go up to 80% or 100%. So we had the number of promoters started at 8, and now we have almost 80. So there are a lot of people involved. There are a lot of more measures, more technologies, alternatives, and they are becoming cost effective and are, I guess they are reaching much more people. So I guess, as Kurt said, we must learn with what we have been doing. Yeah, we have several changes in regulation, and what our objective is not only kilowatt hour, it's also CO2 now, and they are mixed. And so we must learn it all, set our objectives, and learn with our mistakes and the mistakes of others. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Morten.
Well, I'm a person that just says the things that I think I need to say. So sorry if I'm too frank, but that's the way it is. I would say get away from the textbook, try to feel the pulse and understand the market, talk to the companies. If you want to have a scheme that has success, then you need to understand and talk to those that can be the one that can bring you success. If you design something that they say is shit, then don't design it, because it's not going to work. Well, before this job, I came from enterprise, so my colleagues have sometimes been telling me I'm doing too much of this, but I'm just okay. I see them as my customers. I see them as somebody that can help us reach our set goals. And if we want to have a success, then I do at least 50 talks with companies and intermediaries and actors every year, because you can sit there as a normal shopkeeper and say, are the customers coming? No, they're not coming. Why they're not coming? Is it because of bad weather? Because your products are shite? Sorry for the language, or whatever is it? When you have Corona times and stuff, then you can say, okay, I know what is happening, because they're telling me we do not have any projects for you right now, Morten, because this is what's happening. Okay, then we know that. Then we can address our system, because we have all our lords and ladies telling us what's happening, what is not happening. And if you can tell them in advance, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. Why? And you always keep, in Denmark, small country, basically, if I talk to 100 companies, I am addressing 90% of what's important. I can't talk to 90 companies, but I can talk at least to 50 companies, and I have colleagues that I sometimes send out and try to get. So that's my main, we have all these theories and all these textbooks and all these graphs and models and stuff, but if you want to have things to happen, of course it's necessary. That's not what I'm saying is not, but if you you need to get up from the chair and out and talk with the market and understand the market, so you know what's happening and it's going to happen, so you can design better and better. That's, yeah, I'm stopping now, sorry. Yes.
I think if all people working in agencies and ministries have had an experience in companies and vice versa, our world will be better, because there will be much more understanding of how things works. Christos.
I fully agree with Morten. Of course, we have to take into consideration the entrepreneurial interest. For me, it's very crucial, as I saw, to balance between the low bureaucracy and the minimum as possible administrative burden, and to ensure the fair competition. Due to the fact that there are too much technical issues which must be taken into consideration, you have to follow a step-by-step procedure, addressing all of them. For me personally, as a member of the working group, is how to define the selling price. So for the first pilot round, there is the idea to focus on a specific sector, on a specific technology, so as to be more certain about the specification of the technical issues. And as I showed, in order to minimize the administrative burden, it's very crucial to select the appropriate measurement protocol, which will define the data which must be collected and the respective control verification activities. So probably the first pilot round will target on a specific technology, which will be certain that there is adequate interpretorial interest, and is okay step by step. We have to run the first pilot project to improve, then take into consideration the outcomes, and continue. So this must be the approach for me.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam, do you want to say something?
Sorry, just press the wrong button. Look, not really. I've basically got loads more questions, so I might just follow up with each of our speakers later on, because it's been absolutely fascinating. And as Morten said at the beginning of his presentation, you can only really scratch the surface in 15 minutes. And but I think this is a fascinating topic. Lots of design questions that we can also feed into the advice that, as the ENSMOV project, we produce on our website and so on as well after this event. So I think we've got lots of good things to follow up on with all of you.
Okay, thank you. And really, I thank you all because you allowed us to offer a very interesting webinar on this theme related to auctions. And I think you gave a lot of useful hints to everybody in operating in this sector. For the audience, for being with us, you will find everything on the ENSMOV website in the next days, so both the presentations and registration, so you can go on and go more in details on what you heard. And okay, see you in our next events. So please follow us on the website, subscribe to our newsletter, and stay in touch. Thank you, everybody, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.